indication that the formula isn't fair, and some steps, such as you've described, I think would make sense. But I want to make sure they work and don't cause more of an administrative burden than the value we get from it.
Governor, there are a couple of ideas floating around right now in the legislature that address the high cost of education in the state of Vermont, and I wondered if you could talk about what you think about them. One is being brought forward in the Senate, which was talked about in Senate Appropriations yesterday, which would be a 2% reduction in spending in every supervisory union district in the state. And then there's the voluntary merger bill that's in play.
Well, 2% reduction on $1.5 billion is $30 million. That's that would be welcome, but it's a small percentage of the $100 million problem that we're going to have. So it sounds like a positive step, but inadequate at a time when our student population continues to decline 1 or 1.5% every year, and we still keep adding staff in our schools. So any cost reduction strategy I would certainly like to see, but it has to be meaningful to avoid tax increases in the future. In the merger bill, well, I think we have to do more than just give suggestions to school districts. I think we have to have some teeth in those requirements. And it sounds to me like an incentive to the district to consolidate means that the burden will be shifted to all the other districts of the state, all the other taxpayers of the state, unless there's some overall strategy of reducing those costs. So I guess I don't see that the voluntary merger approach would really accomplish the cost containment that we need.
Do you think in combination with perhaps eliminating the small school grants that a program like that might work?
I think eliminating the small school grants would be a positive step. It would save a few $1 million, maybe $5 million, I'm not sure, but not a lot, again, in the totality of a $1.5 billion program. So that's all these steps are good. They're small. What we really need is to bend that curve for the long haul. And one of the biggest challenges, obviously, is our personal service cost and the ratio that we have. That's the lowest in the nation. State employees took a pay cut, as you know. Granite workers made concessions. Some municipal workers have around the state. Certainly, hard-working Vermonters in the private sector are agreeing to compensation changes. A few school districts are agreeing to freezing salaries or other changes, but since we have a big education fund through which all the schools are funded, the good work of some communities to contain those personal services costs really don't benefit them because it's part of a larger whole. So that's why I think there has to be a statewide focused effort to reduce our student-teacher ratio, and I think the language that I submitted to the legislature in the budget in January to not fill all the school teacher positions that occur during the coming years is a good step.
Could we be clear on one thing? You're talking about a student-teacher ratio. Do you really mean student-staff ratio?
Well, it could be either, Bob. The student-teacher ratio is 10 to 1. The staff-to-student ratio is 4.5 to 1. And we could use either as a goal, whatever. See how flexible I am? Or whatever the legislature prefers.
Did you get a sense from legislative leaders yesterday where you're headed on property tax?
No.
So that the discussion did not go to the level where...
My request of them, as I mentioned, was do something. It could be the ideas I proposed in January. It could be some of the other ideas that have surfaced since then. But do something to bend the cost curve and get us out of this imbalance in our tax burden and spending that is a real problem for Vermonters.
What did you sense from their reaction?
Well, I didn't hear anything specific, but we'll continue to talk about it.
You've been governor for 7 or 8 of the 13 or 14 years since Act 60 was passed. What part of this is your responsibility?
as an effort to reduce the property tax burden that involved an increase in the general sales tax. And it worked for a year or two. I recall from my own experience, property tax bill went down noticeably the first year. In the second year, it was almost back up to where it was. And by year 3, it just kept rising again, as it always had. And I thought that was a reasonable exchange, because if you look at charts about relative tax rates around the country, we were and still are on the low side in sales taxes, but number 1 in property tax burden, number 2. But it didn't work, and it didn't work because there weren't the cost controls that are essential to limiting that property tax burden over time. So I agreed to a shift. I think it was a good lesson for Vermonters that simply shifting from one revenue source to another doesn't solve the problem. There have to be true cost controls. So since then, Louis, for 5 years in a row, I've recommended cost controls. I've recommended property tax caps. I've recommended limitations on personnel. I've recommended various strategies to reduce the cost, because that's the only way we're going to get property taxes under control. So I hope they'll approve some of these ideas this year.
Why do you think they do that now, when they haven't in the past?
I hope they'll listen to the folks who've been at the State House this week. I hope they'll look at the data that the NEA, as well as other organizations, have put together and realize that this is out of control. Seems to me that data are powerful. 1,600 fewer kids last year, 218 more employees. That just doesn't work. That's not reality. That's not what's happening in state government or businesses that I'm familiar with around the state. When the demand for the service declines, you don't add more employees. I've talked with a lot of Vermonters who've made the tough decision to reduce their staff because they have to keep their businesses going and respond to a lower demand. Only in public education do we see the opposite reaction from the demand for the service, and that just doesn't work, and the result is the second highest property tax burden in America. So I hope it's gotten serious enough so that legislators will understand how serious it is and do something about it.